Halfway through my trip to Japan, I found myself alone on an empty street in Kyoto. Not even 18 years old, my parents had surprised me with this trip just weeks earlier, as a present for graduating high school and getting into a reasonable university. My days consisted of wandering the maze-like streets of Kyoto, Tokyo, or wherever we were that day until it got dark and I had to navigate my way back to where we were staying. My parents seldom joined me on my wanderings, as we had clashing ideas on where you should visit on a vacation. They preferred temples and shrines, and I preferred cityscapes and neighborhoods. In this particular neighborhood of Kyoto I had found myself in, darkness had already fallen, and I was beginning my return trip back to the hotel we were staying at. Neon signs lit up in every direction, providing more light for me than the street lamps were. Eventually, I stopped at a neon sign that read, Pachinko, 10 yen arcade. This was exciting for a man that had already spent most of his money in the first half of the trip, because 10 yen was the equivalent of less than a penny. I made my way through the entrance and gazed around at the pachinko parlor on the first floor. The deafening noise of the machines combined with the thick haze of cigarette smoke from the players made for an overwhelming sensory experience. Through the smoke, I discovered an arrow-shaped sign with the word arcade on it, pointing to a staircase in the corner of the room. I quickly made my way to the stairs and found myself on the third floor. What I saw before me was a crammed space filled with dozens of Japanese arcade games of all shapes and sizes that were on their last legs, sometimes literally. Machines from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, kept in rough yet working condition, filled up this tiny space, making it look enormous. Their blinking CRT screens and loud sound effects called out to me, begging for the attention they once received in their prime years. I inserted a 500 yen coin into the coin machine and listened to the old thing slowly and rhythmically spit out 50 coins of smaller value for me to use. I circled the arcade several times, looking for games that might hold my interest. Unfortunately, most of the games were entirely in Japanese, so the only way to really know what you were getting into was by playing it. I decided on a fighting game in the corner of the room, only because there was an identical machine next to it with a man already playing it. I mean, if one of the only people in the room was playing it, it had to be good, right? I put the coin into the slot and heard the machine make a blip noise, letting me know my credit had been counted. I pressed several wrong buttons thinking they were the start button until I found the right one, and I chose my character. I couldn't read any of the character names, so I just chose the guy who had the biggest muscles, because obviously that meant he was the best fighter. To say the game was hard would be an understatement. I found myself getting my ass kicked by the AI fighters right from the start. You would think they would at least have the courtesy to let you beat the first fighter before they make you start spending yen like there's no tomorrow, but no. After losing in round 2 several times, I decided to see if I could learn what I was missing by watching the person next to me. The young Japanese man couldn't have been more than 25. He was wearing a traditional Japanese business outfit, a white shirt with black slacks and shoes. His slicked back jet black hair was starting to look unkempt, as if he had had a long day, and his sleeves were rolled up. He was dead focused on the game, and you could see the screen's reflection through his dark brown eyes. His hands moved quietly and quickly. The joystick seemed to move him, not vice versa. His button presses were meticulous and strategized. The enemy that I was struggling to beat couldn't even touch him. He was obtaining what's referred to in the arcade industry as a flawless victory, a match where no mistakes are made. He must have noticed me staring at him, so he took his eyes off his screen to look at me, and then to look back at my character on screen getting hit with a flurry of uppercuts from the enemy. Without saying anything to me, he gently grabbed my hands and positioned them on the arcade controls, putting my left hand on the joystick and my right hand on the buttons. Then, he put his hands over mine, like a mother teaching a young child how to play the piano. He moved my hands around with his, showing me how to create combos and special attacks for my character. It was just like that scene from Ghost, only I was Demi Moore and learning arcade games, not pottery. I tried to keep my eyes on the screen, but all I could watch was his game as his enemy AI hit his motionless character over and over, ruining his flawless victory. I felt horrible. He was losing rounds of this game he had mastered just to teach someone who didn't even know what they were doing. After I grasped some of the basic combos of my character and he felt satisfied, He took his hands off mine and went back to his game, narrowly avoiding defeat with just a sliver of his health left. Incidentally, that was his final round, so he looked at me, smiled, gave a small nod, and left. I remained speechless throughout the whole exchange. Not that English would have helped me much regardless. I looked around the room to see if anybody else noticed what had happened, but nobody was there. My best guess was that anyone else in the room had gone home for the night while he was helping me. As I exited the arcade, I felt dumbstruck, confused, and truthfully, a little bit in love. I stared up at the moon, now fully risen and shining brightly, and started making my way back to where I was sleeping that night. I tried to find the arcade again the next day, but due to the darkness and my love of getting lost in a city, I could never find the area again. Looking back at it now, maybe even the moon was a neon sign that night, guiding billions of people around the world into an experience that would change them for the rest of their life.